Hello, dear listener, or as I prefer, Hammerhead. Welcome to the House of Hammer. At the last check, I'm Kev, and I'll be your guide for today as we venture on through the history of this place. Like some exotic bug that's trapped in amber, we're still going through the Hammer films of 1950, and we've some way to go. 1950 saw 6 Hammer films being released, and even with my less than mathematical superbrain, that's an average of one every second month. Imagine if James Bond films came out at that rate. Daniel Craig would be over by spring, and George Lazenby would be home for tea. Even though they are quota quickies and B-movies at best, I still thought this was an insane amount of films for what is, still at this time, a very small family-run studio working in a mansion house. This was until I started looking into it a little further, and came across 1958, and ended up researching amphetamines. Which brings us to why I'm now in the cellar with 1,500 spent cups of coffee, a paintbrush, and a glow stick. Give me a second. Right, where were we? The year kicked off in style with The Man in Black in January. Next up was the action submarine lighthouse extravaganza Dick Barton at Bay in March. Then back to the scary stuff in May with Room to Let. What happened next is anybody's guess, because in August and September we then got a double whammy of what can be loosely described as comedy films. In the previous room of this ever-expanding house, we peeked behind someone at the door, which can be best described as, results may vary. This one presents us with What the Butler Saw. I was expecting something quite different to what we actually got. When we first started the unenviable task of making the list of Hammer and exclusive films to cover, it wasn't Slave Girls, Blood Orange, or even Mutiny on the Buses that caught my eye. It was this. What the Butler Saw. This brought back distant childhood memories of the bright red machines at the end of the seaside piers that I wasn't allowed to have a go of. Not a 1950 Hammer film or a play by Joe Orton. After a little bit of digging, these machines were indeed known as What the Butler Saw machines. Maybe this is why I'm obsessed with butlers. Anyway, the correct name for these are the rather grand-sounding mutoscopes, and their story is older and far more salacious than cinema itself. December 1895 saw the Lumiere brothers scare the living daylights out of their audience with a train in Paris. The idea of moving pictures wasn't exactly as new as they tried to make out, though. The zoetrope, the praxinoscope, the zoopraxiscope, and even the Lumiere brothers' Kinora, which is too orangey for crows, worked on a similar principle to the flipbook. In fact, the easiest way to describe the mutoscope is like a flipbook and a Rolodex in a housing worked by a hand crank. Butlers, hand cranks, this is ticking all my boxes. Probably the main reason for the mutoscope's incredible success was its simplistic design, which made them very cheap to produce in vast numbers. Another major selling point was, rather than being projected, whatever the entertainment was inside, it could only be seen by one person at a time through a private viewfinder. The public were hungry for whatever's hot right now in the Victorian era, and embraced the mutoscope and similar devices that soon all gave birth to all types of short peep shows. This would inadvertently also become the mutoscope's ticket to notoriety. But as I've waffled on for long enough, here's more about that from our good friend Adam.
Everyone thinks that the phrase "what the butler saw" was derived from the saucy mutoscope machines that lined seaside piers. In actual fact, the phrase had entered the public lexicon all the way back in the 1880s, when polite society was rocked by the scandalous divorce case of Lord Colin Campbell and his wife, Gertrude Elizabeth Blood. They'd actually only married in 1881, But upon the declaration of their union, the marriage remained unconsummated due to Lord Colin's health problems. Sometime before the marriage, he had contracted what the doctors referred to as the loathsome disease, generally thought to mean venereal disease or syphilis. Lord Colin had failed to disclose this little fact to his new bride, who spent the first months of their marriage wondering why Colin wouldn't come near her at bedtime. According to reports, so frustrated had she become at her husband's lack of desire for her, that she sought love in the arms of other men, who each waited until Lord Colin was out of the house, and then paid their visits to Lady Gertrude at their house at 79 Cadogan Place in London. Finally, on a trip to Scotland, Lord Colin let his guard down, along with his trousers, and took to the marital bed. The result was that Lady Gertrude swiftly found herself infected with Lord Colin's loathsome disease. Her response, upon discovering that her husband had knowingly infected her, was to petition a judge to grant her a separation order upon the grounds of cruelty. Her husband had knowingly infected her with the loathsome disease after all. The petition was granted. Facing public humiliation, Lord Colin countered by filing for divorce on the grounds that his wife had committed adultery with no less than 4 men. Lord Blandford, son of the 7th Duke of Marlborough, Sir Shaw, the chief of the Metropolitan Fire Brigade, Sir William Butler, noted adventurer, and Thomas Bird, the household's family doctor. Lady Gertrude countered by also filing for divorce on the grounds of his adultery with their maid. In 1886, the scandalous society divorce case erupted across the newspapers, and a morbidly fascinated country lapped up details of infections and adultery and famous lovers visiting love nests. Within this sea of infamy emerged a surprise attraction: the household's very own butlers, Albert and James, whose testimonies regarding the encounters of their mistress provided front-page gossip fodder for months. According to his account, Lady Gertrude had instructed Albert to not announce Captain Shaw or Lord Blandford in his lordship's hearing. Albert the butler swore that he'd once arrived into her rooms to find Blandford and Lady Gertrude together on the drawing-room sofa. Blandford's arm was around her waist and her dress was disarranged. It was perhaps this interruption which had led to Albert's being replaced by James the butler, whose testimony proved even more shocking. You see, James was something of a keyhole peeper. On one afternoon, he'd been happily peeping through the keyhole of the dining room and had seen Lady Gertrude entwined with the London fire chief. "I saw Lady Colin lying down with Captain Shaw on the carpet," he told a shocked court. "Did you see her bust?" came a question. "I certainly saw more than that," James replied. James then went on to describe exactly what he'd seen through the keyhole, but so torrid was his account that the reporters in court were ordered by the judge not to print the details, which he described as unfit for publication. This led to a devilish piece of detective work on the part of Neptune Blood, Lady Gertrude's brother. He hurried on over to Cadogan Place and examined the keyholes there, only to find that on each side of the door the holes were protected by heavy brass drops, small swinging covers that must be pushed aside in order for the key to be inserted. He rushed back to the court with this news and declared that with the drops down on just one side of the door, it was impossible to see through the keyhole. In order to prove the point, the jury themselves were transported to Cadogan Place and shown the offending door containing the now most notorious keyhole in the country. Alas, for Lady Gertrude, upon investigation, this new piece of evidence was discredited. "We find the escutcheons of the keyhole are very stiff and will stay up at right angles," the foreman of the jury recounted when they got back to the courtroom. "And we found it impossible to put the outside escutcheons in a perpendicular position at all." Incredibly, when the case came to a close, since none of the adultery allegations could be actually proven, and since both sides vehemently denied their unfaithfulness, the judge ruled that neither divorce case was successful, and that both must remain married to each other. And so while they proceeded to live very separate lives in very separate locations, they remained legally married until 1895, when Lord Colin did in fact expire due to the deterioration caused by his loathsome disease. Unfortunately, Lady Gertrude herself also expired from its effects, but not until 1911, by which time she'd successfully emancipated herself from her husband's reputation by making a name for herself as one of the more popular journalists and writers of the day. A shame, then, that just before she passed away, a newfangled attraction began to appear on seaside piers and penny arcades, one whose name was directly inspired by the court case from 1886, and which must have provided a painful reminder of a man she wished never to have met.
Rather than being about the fun of the fair, or indeed much fun at all, What the Butler Saw is the fourth of 5 films shot by Hammer in and around Oakley Court. It's yet another radio serial, dragged kicking and screaming to a slightly more visual medium, and in an attempt to pack as much fun as they can into this translation, the cast is headed up by the comedic talents of screen veteran Edward Rigby, future Carry On series regular Michael Ward, and, as the titular butler, Bembridge, we have Henry Mollison, who has quite the interesting backstory away from the screen. To tell us all about it, here's Smokey, just Smokey, like Sade, but even more of a smooth operator.
It should come as no surprise, considering the time period we are in, that some, in fact many of the brave lads and lasses that appeared in some of these films from Hammer, were also part of the war effort as well. In fact, we've already mentioned several. J. Elder Wills, Christiana Brand and Don Stannard are just a few that all did their bit when it came to signing up for their country. That they did it all should of course be lauded and celebrated and, most importantly, never forgotten. Today's star Henry Mollison, the titular butler of the piece, it could be argued deserves a place with the aforementioned too. Returning back to the UK from a trip to the United States in 1939 with the full intention of joining the British Armed Forces, the vessel he was journeying on was captured by the Nazis. He and the rest of the crew were taken to a German POW camp where they were to spend the next 5 years. Not only was this understandably terrifying, but Henry was having to live with the fact that his burning desire to join the military was to remain unfulfilled, and also that he was being kept from his wife, the actress Lena Basquette. While remaining a prisoner, he became the organiser of prison camp entertainment, putting his skills to very good use and kept the morale and spirits of his fellow detainees as high as possible by putting on almost 60 shows. Known for his wit and courage whilst in the camp, Henry and some of his fellow prisoners decided to attempt a breakout using the time-honoured method of tunnelling. Not a bad plan, I hear you say, and you'd be right. It certainly had worked before, and it would work again too. Unfortunately, this was not one of those times, and the tunnel proceeded to collapse. On the parade ground, all the would-be escapees were rounded up and told in no uncertain terms that if any such attempt was made again, they would all be shot. Mollison's retort to this, said in a whisper that was loud enough to be perfectly audible, "I think it's strange that Jerry built a camp on top of a tunnel." The camp commandant returned with the chilling reply, "Very funny, Herr Mollison. You will be the first to be shot." Henry finally returned to Britain after the war. His acting performances were few and far between, but it should be noted that not only did he feature heavily in today's discussion of What the Butler Saw, but he also appeared in Whiskey Galore and Ealing's wonderful Alec Guinness vehicle, The Man in the White Suit. Sadly, as so often is the case with stories such as these, it doesn't have the happiest of endings. Evelyn Henry Jackson Mollison, mislaid somewhat by a film industry that seemingly had just moved on, never really fully recovered from his experiences suffered during the war, and passed away a penniless and broken man in a rest home in Greenwich, London, in July of 1985. He was 80 years old. I guess sometimes it's easy to forget or overlook the major sacrifices that were made during that time. The important thing, obviously, is that we don't. Times change and attitudes move on, of course, but these things should always be respected. So, my humble advice is just, every now and again, when you sometimes think about what a seemingly pampered existence actors can lead, Think of the Henry Mollisons, the Jimmy Stewarts, the David Nivens, and the Audrey Hepburns of this world, to name but a few. And maybe raise a glass, or light a candle to them. Because without them, not only would our lives be a lot less lighter, they would very possibly be a whole lot darker. The very best to them, and to you all.
Now let's see. You've had the glamour of Adam, the animal magnetism of Smokey, and my doodling. But where would we be without the brains of the operation? Here's Ben Taylorson to take us on a safari.
In What the Butler Saw, a wealthy earl returns from a 10-year stint as governor of the Coconut Islands. It quickly becomes apparent that he spent the majority of the last decade killing everything in sight, as he brings with him several crates worth of exotic hunting trophies. I'd argue it's a distinctly human peculiarity to look upon the elegance, splendour and sheer magnificence of nature's finest creatures and declare, "Oof, I'm going to murder that," in the same way I might if presented with a pepperoni pizza. As a species, we are undeniably, and by our very nature, hunters. But hunting for food, for survival, is one thing. It's a base instinct, a logical fight for existence. But trophy hunting is altogether different. An urge to track down and massacre unfamiliar beasts, then to have their heads stuffed and mounted on your dining room wall, so as to be a conversation starter between the soup and the main course. Or perhaps even go the whole hog, stuffed hog obviously, and have an entire trophy room, or, as Ace Ventura once declared it, a lovely room of death. Trophy hunting is one form of hunting for sport more generally, and human beings have been doing that for a very long time. In ancient and medieval Europe, wealthy landowners would set aside vast acreages for sport hunting. The noble elite would then enjoy hunting game on their vast rural playgrounds, whilst many poor folk struggled to put food on the table. The game reserves therefore became a target for poachers, and in turn, poaching was harshly punished. William the Conqueror, for instance, stipulated that poachers could variously be castrated, banished, or have their eyes torn out. Ouch. Trophy hunting differs from simply hunting game for sport, as the trophy in question refers to some form of evidence gathered from the prey. Usually only some parts of the animal are kept as trophies, say the head, the skin, the horns or the antlers, although preserving the entire animal via taxidermy is not unusual. I mean, whose home office doesn't look incomplete without a stuffed 8-foot polar bear in the corner? Trophy hunting as we understand it today can be traced back to the 19th century. In 1892, a man named Roland Ward outlined what he called the horn measurements and weights of the great game of the world. It was the first official record of trophy hunts. Roland Ward was a British taxidermist and founder of the firm Roland Ward Limited of Piccadilly, London. The company specialised in and was renowned for its taxidermy work on birds and big game trophies, but it did other types of work as well, including making many practical items from antlers, feathers, feet, skin and tusks, as well as other animal parts. These became sometimes known as Wardian furniture, and the delightful objects on offer included zebra hoof inkwells, antler furniture and elephant feet umbrella stands. A few decades later, on the other side of the Atlantic in 1930, the Boone and Crockett Club, founded by Teddy Roosevelt in 1887, drew up the Boone and Crockett Trophy Scoring System for North American animals. In the same year, the International Council for Game and Wildlife Conservation, which has its own trophy evaluation system, was registered in Paris. Trophy hunting as a cultural phenomenon was, by this point, well and truly a thing. Those Boone and Crockett lads are still on the go, so I've had a look at their website to try and work out what's going on. I was hoping for some sort of idiot-proof pyramid system where you start with like a dormouse or similar as an entry-level kill, then progress like all the way up to legendary status if you bag a yeti or a pterodactyl. What I found was a bit similar to that, but I'll confess I didn't really understand what I was looking at. There was a list with bears at the top and sheep at the bottom, and the in-betweeny levels populated with deer, elk, moose, goats and a walrus. All of which could lead to quite a distasteful version of Play Your Cards Right. Higher than a central Canada barren ground carabao, you say? A Canada moose! Higher than a Canada moose, you say? A Pacific walrus! Higher than a Pacific walrus, you say? Oh no, it's a Rocky Mountain goat, unlucky. Big game hunting is a further subdivision of trophy hunting. Well, kind of. Its popularity rose sharply during the Victorian era, with trophies collected for museums as well as for recreation. If you're ever feeling too good about your life and wish to balance out the universe by thoroughly depressing yourself, there's a list of historically notorious big game hunters on a certain popular online encyclopedia. It's all stuff like Sir Bartley Fartangle, believed to have shot over 1,000 African elephants. Major Irwin Winterchest hunted numerous game including lion, leopard, white rhinoceros, black rhinoceros, buffalo, giraffe, various antelope, hippo, and a rock python, mostly on horseback while wearing a kilt. I assume they mean him, not the rock python wearing the kilt. General Buck Dynamo killed over 500 lions and eventually died from injuries caused by a rhino collapsing on top of him after he'd shot it. Now, the more perceptive among you may have gathered from the tone of this segment that I'm not much of a fan of hunting, be it trophy or otherwise, but that's not to deny that even today it's a very popular pastime. The latest report that I could find stated that over 1.26 million trophies had been imported into the United States in the last 10 years, and of these, the big five, lion, African elephant, African leopard, rhinoceros, and African buffalo comprised over 32,000 of them. That's a lot of big dead animals. So, if we return momentarily to the Earl in What the Butler Saw and his apparent desire to gun down anything that moves on the Coconut Islands, we can't even console ourselves with the knowledge that it's an outdated pursuit. But again, I'm not here to preach. Who am I to say what you can and can't shoot, stuff and mount on your wall? The thing is though, as someone with no experience of hunting whatsoever, that said I did witness firsthand a man punch a bee out of the air, but that's about as close as it gets. Is shooting a large, lumbering animal with a high-powered weapon really that much of a challenge? Is it a remarkable feat? I'd say not. Eating a bicycle, now there's a challenge. A challenge actually undertaken by Michel Lotito, who in fact, over the course of his life, ate 18 bicycles, 15 shopping trolleys, 7 television sets, 1 coffin with handles, and an entire light aircraft. Yes, the man actually ate an aeroplane. And for these remarkable achievements, Lotito was awarded a brass plaque by the Guinness Book of Records, which he also ate. And no animals were harmed in the process.
I've actually been on a safari, you know. It would usually take place down the subway near the Arndale Centre and would invariably see us taking down several shopping trolleys in the prime of their lives. I regret nothing. Much like the aforementioned Earl, who returns home with Bembridge and along with the trophies, an unexpected stowaway in the form of exotic royalty. Princess Lapis has fallen head over heels, and like the Earl, can't live without Bembridge. What ensues is a farce that has nudity in the Foreign Office, a particularly distasteful tabloid reporter, and all the local gentry invited for a jolly old knees-up on a love potion. Released on the 11th of September 1950, despite some of its adult-leaning themes, What the Butler Saw was granted a U certificate by the BBFC. I'm not sure what the U stands for. Is it unlovable? Unruly? Unbelievable? Unwatchable, undeserving, unearthly.
Okay, my friends, we're still in 1950, and we arrive to What the Butler Saw. We'll come on to the plot and the main characters in just a moment, but I think something needs to be addressed very early on, which I would like to get your opinion on, because there are some challenging aspects to this film, and I think possibly the most controversial element of this film is, I'm afraid to give this straight to you, Adam, is it's a shit font for the film.
Yeah, my thoughts exactly, yeah. Yeah.
Should we talk about the font? No, let's not. Okay, so first off, straight away, IMDb, the description, the plot line of the film is completely wrong. So we're not going to go with that at all. So if anyone is looking for the plot of this on IMDb, don't bother, because it's wrong.
And there isn't a plot anywhere else, is there?
No, well, there certainly isn't one in the film. So
no, it's not true.
So we have a British upper class Earl who returns from 10 years overseas to a place we'll come to briefly. He has a very faithful butler, and when they get back to the Earl's family, we have a stowaway in the form of a foreign princess, shall we say, who has fallen in love with the butler, and chaos ensues.
Literally.
Well, yeah. This is Hammer sticking with kind of the quote-unquote comedy element that we kind of encountered with Someone at the Door.
Did they?
Well, sort of. So, does it work as a film? Does it work as a comedy? This is something we should go into.
Yeah, I mean, I'd go back to your description there. Chaos ensues, and argue that no, it doesn't, because you're absolutely right. In this film, is set up like a farce, but unfortunately, it's missing the key elements of a farce, which are that there needs to be an element of deceit and
Comedy.
and then conflict that has consequences. And repeatedly throughout this film, we're set up with, oh, this is going to be the plot, and immediately, literally 30 seconds later, it isn't. So, to give you an example, our princess arrives and we think, oh, okay, the film is going to be the butler knows that she's there and he's going to be keeping her secret from the rest of the household. Nope. A minute later, the household knows she's there. Okay, so the film's going to be the household are keeping her secret from everyone else. No, they invite guests in to witness her being there. Mm-hmm. Okay, fine, so we're going to keep her secret from, I don't know, the press. No, the press arrive and they're there as well. And then what is eventually, driven to be the consequences, if you like, is the princess's father, King Ulala, and we think, oh, okay, so that's, he's unhappy that she's supposedly been kidnapped or taken against her will, but she, of course, hasn't. We think, well, he doesn't know that, but then he does know that, and there's no consequence there as well. So the whole thing is, in terms of a comedic sort of farce, it misses every single beat, and I don't even know what, for a film that's meant to be a comedy, there are no jokes, and it's just left me, dumbfounded at how odd this film is.
I completely agree. That surely we must concur that it's got to be one of the most important things for a comedy is to have a joke in it, at least several sometimes, and this doesn't have any. So I don't really understand what the point of this film is. Is it to garner... obviously, it's not there to garner the response that we're going to have during this round table, because it's from 1950. But what was it even at the time? Was it to, I don't know, cash in on some, love for foreign lands or something like that? It just ends up... I'm sorry to go back to what we'd said about someone at the door. It ends up as a confusing mess.
Well, the thing is, comedy is... probably, I would say, more than any other genre, the most subjective. And it's the hardest genre to transfer to different time periods. Because I think horror films, whether they are scary or not, are still kind of charming 100 years later. Comedy, though, oh, God, I mean, the state of, the sense of humour of the nation changes constantly. And you step out of line with it once, comedies from the 90s that we found hilarious are just stultifying now. This in particular, though, is not just unfunny, it's just so offensive. It's you watch it and it's just appalling to watch. It's the way they treat not just foreign people, but women or people who work for them. Everyone gets a kicking in this film. So it's terribly hard to watch. I mean, I'm looking at this with my 1950s head on, thinking, could this have been charming at all? But if I was working class, I'd be offended by this film. If I was not British, I would have been offended by this film. I'm talking about, in 1950. If I was upper class, I'd have been offended by this film. If I was a fan of comedy, I would have been offended by this film. I just don't understand who went to the cinema and thought, oh my goodness, I'm so satisfied with what I just saw. Because I think it just offends everybody. And this is a really strange comparison, but the Carry On films, while troublesome in their own way, the early Carry On films that were being made in sort of the 50s, this sort of period, had a charm to them. Carry On Constable, Carry On Nurse. I mean, they're just pure comedies with likable characters and gags. This is just basically like, oh, here's a setup, and you expect a punchline, and instead it slaps you in the eyes, and then it just it makes fun of the person that stood next to you, and then it makes fun of your family member, and then it just sort of is out of there. It's just God, I thought Sporting Love was a bad film. This is the worst, by far, Hammer film we've seen.
So many things that are wrong with this. It's ridiculous. Not only the rampant racism, but obviously the logistics. I mean, you've got a rhino that gets delivered completely in a box with its head sticking out the front.
We had, sorry. Are
How
we going
dare
back to
they?
the Earl's business plan?
Well, I'm just thinking about the logistics of the whole thing. I mean, you've got the princess that hides in a crate. The mind boggles at that because I don't know how long the voyage would take, but obviously she's never heard of Hermes because, oh, good God, you would not get in a box after that. Yeah, it's just shocking. It's a bit all over the place. You've got bits where the princess is hiding in the pantry, for instance. I mean, how big are pantries? Because the butler's pantry in this is so big that it's actually got its own windows, its own sink, its own countertops, its own kitchen, if you like. It's a very strange film indeed.
My pantry's like that, I have to say.
The smaller one.
Yeah, it's slightly smaller.
Kidding, it's twice the size.
I think it's definitely worth adding that straight away. I mean, we have to. If anyone is curious about watching this, the red flags we need to raise exactly what Adam and Kev brought up there,
yeah.
and which I
Logistics.
referenced slightly in it. Well, yes, of course, the business plan and logistics people. Get ready for that. It's a terrible business
Shocking.
plan. But no, this film has racism in it, and it's quite rampant. The misogyny is somewhat rampant as well. And also, apart from, I don't know, you'll have to tell me, lads, 2-3 characters, everyone else is deeply unlikable. So there, we save this till the end with our ratings normally, but I'm going to have to agree with Adam. This is the worst Hammer film we have reviewed so far. And it's a damn pity because the setup could be good, but they just waste it away, and it's a damn shame.
There's a point where Ben mentioned it earlier. The plots all over the place. I feel like if they'd have kept with the butler, just keeping her out of the way, it would have been a start. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the issue is that, again, it's meant to be a farce, yet you're not really meant to have deeply unlikable characters in a farce. And there are 3 or 4 deeply unlikable characters to the point of I'd really, really, really hated one of them. Algernon, the Earl, and the butler and the princess are likeable, and they're our protagonists, and that's fair enough, but they have nothing to play off against. Going back to what you said about the difficult aspects of the film, I could forgive certain amounts of it because it's some of it is basically talking about the mysteries of the unknown, because you've got to remember, 1950, we're looking at 70 years ago. I think some of the dialogue they use is very telling. So the jungle and the tropical islands are interchangeable in terms of being these far-flung foreign places, which I think more says is more ignorance than it is racism. But then some of the dialogue that's spat out by some of the characters in relation to the princess is unforgivable even in 1950. And I honestly believe, again, like Adam said, I honestly believe that there'll be people watching this film at the time who thought that this isn't right.
You'd like to think so.
That's the thing. I mean, I can watch films from this era through a certain lens because I do realise that attitudes change. I mean, films that I enjoyed in the 80s and 90s, I watch now and go, oof, Christ,
Yep.
But I remember enjoying them completely guilt-free at the time because attitudes do change, and I think you do have to accept that. But there are certain things that are not okay. This film is such an uncomfortable experience. The language they use is even, the crying shame of it is when you have a film like Song of Freedom, which is, it was made a decade and a half before this, and yet it's way more progressive, it's way more kind, it's way more humane. It's actually funnier in a lot of places than this thing. Like I say, comedy is a subjective thing, but I don't think it needed to be as offensive as it is. And there are certain characters, as I say, I'm not even going to name the guy, but certain lines that just they're like a punch to the gut. Jesus, I don't want to watch this film. It was a hard film to get through, and I must admit, it took a few attempts as well because it's so uninteresting. Take all that stuff out, it's a really bad film. It's badly filmed. It's badly directed. It's badly scripted. There's no jokes. There's the characters are just paper thin. It's just a terrible, terrible film that doesn't deserve to exist. It has no redeeming qualities. And I don't think I've seen many films like this. It's quite a surprise.
I'm glad you actually brought that up, Adam. I think that's something that we need to address, irregardless of whether we find it massively offensive the way we do. What you said there, let's focus on the film itself. Is it a good film? No. So, as you say, it's badly made. But I think, let's look at a few positives, shall we? I think that's a good way to go. Let's pick out a few each. So, Oakley Court, looking resplendent at the start. Looks great. Wonderful. Edward Rigby, who plays the Earl.
Love him in loads of films. He's a great actor.
He's brilliant.
I completely echo that. I just wanted to say, this is his film. So every time he's on screen, it's warm, it's comforting. He is a pleasant man who, if you think about it, I can't remember him being negative about anything throughout the entire runtime.
That's because you're not a rhino.
That's true. Well, how do you know?
In a box.
Yeah, right. So I hope you agree. But I think this is Edward Rigby's film. I mean, his performance is the best. He's not responsible for the racism.
It should have.
Well, sticking with Edward Rigby then, he has to be possibly our first Hammer bathing belle, because I can't remember anybody else being in a bath so far, and I'm pretty sure he's not got a lot of water in there either, which doesn't help. So that's a positive.
Yep.
Is it though?
Well, I mean, it's a start.
Yeah, you've got to take them where you can. I mean, Mrs. Thimble, that's a great one. I mean, I wish we could have actually talked about the history of thimbles instead of this film, but there you go.
Wow.
Yeah, the princess, I feel like she's sadly underused, because her performance, to be fair, with what she's given, she's making a good shot of it. She's trying her best, and unfortunately,
It's because she's actually got a personality.
Absolutely, yeah, and with so little dialogue that's in English as well, and the fact that she's actually making up a language on the spot by the looks of it sometimes, it actually pays off. She's got kind of a comedic, fast-talking Spaniard kind of feel to it. When you get those Scorchio people, it's that kind of thing. And
she's only 19, Kev, as well.
Really?
In this
wow.
film.
Really?
Good
Wow.
grief. And of course, I would always want to see a double-decker canoe as well. So there's plenty of...
Wouldn't we all?
Absolutely. There's plenty of odd shots in here that you've got to really dig through. I mean, luckily, we've been able to watch it a couple of times, and...
Luckily.
Well, I say that because you're actually able to look for the positives as well. There are positives in here, but...
There are.
Yeah, I feel like we're all raining down on it, but there are some lovely moments in there. You just got to really dig deep.
I do think we're all raining down on it for a reason, though. I take all the problematic elements out of it. It's a really bad film. It's really, really bad. It's a terrible. Yeah. I mean, it's like, nails down the chalkboard for a lot of it. God, I don't think I've watched a film so many times trying to make sense of what's happening and getting to the end and thinking, God, that just wasn't worth it. I do want to
try and find some positives.
I think Edward Rigby's great. I think the girl Mercy Hasted, who plays Lapis, I think she's very good, and she rolls her sleeves up and she gets on with it. And it must have been an awful experience for her, because let's be honest, has to parade around in front of these leering, horrible racists for the whole film. And I think Henry Mollison's character is actually very interesting. I would have loved to see a film about him that wasn't this story. I think there's a good Jeeves story in there somewhere that they just went completely the wrong way. But what I do want to say quickly is that Hammer movies are never, they're not really known for being, let's say, PC when held up to today's standards. This is not something that I think we should make a big thing out of, especially when we get to the horrors, because I think, they do have there's always going to be, an argument about the role of women in certain Hammer films and the role of, the role of, men and women and sexuality and how it's used in Hammer films. I think we're just going to be on hiding to nothing if we have to bring this up for every single Hammer film we talk about. But I do think that in this film in particular, it's quite bad. I mean, it's quite offensive. the way it's used, and to the fact that it's an earlier film just makes it a little bit more, I don't know, it's a very uncomfortable film to watch. And I'm not saying that with a right-on woke head or anything like that. When you watch it, it's just the way the characters talk about certain people of other nations and the way they talk about women. It's a real kick in the balls, especially because we've had great women characters, we've had great racial representation and stuff. It's a terrible film. It has a really bad script and very bad problematic elements to it. I think it was almost like Hammer were rinsing themselves of all of their problematic things in one film and getting it out there. And if I was them, I would have stuck it in a capsule and buried it at the centre of the earth. It's just a shame it exists. It's a terrible film.
I think, just to pick up on what Adam said there, I don't think we will need to come back to these issues very often, but the problem is with this film, the tone is so mean-spirited, and that's a word that Smokey in particular has heard me
that's the word.
say
That's
before.
exactly right. It's mean-spirited. Yeah. It's not really
Had the film been decent and enjoyable, we'd have been talking about the problems as an aside, but they're brought to the forefront by the fact that the tone of the film is so unpleasant. But to go back to what Smokey asked about bringing something positive, I think that the conclusion of the film is nice. And it is the only part of the whole film that is logical, because you watch it and you think, okay, yes, that's where this film needed to get to. Just unfortunately, it's taken every wrong step to get there. Yeah. So I enjoyed the last 10 minutes, genuinely enjoyed them, but that was the only bit of it that I did.
That's fair enough. I mean, to echo what both of you have just said there, is that do you know what? I felt let down. I felt let down by Hammer. Because, as you say, Song of Freedom, we had this, okay, there were some issues towards the latter part of the film that we addressed at the time when we did that. And, okay, fair enough, they were issues and we addressed them. Not a problem. Okay, fair enough. But then look at what the rest of it was and how inclusive it was. That was great. And then look at what we've encountered since then. It occupies a hallowed spot on the House of Hammer bingo card of the plucky heroine. You've got this progressive thing happening that Hammer did for 10 years of these strong, capable women and being clever and capable of everything. And then you get to this and that's all gone. So you bring in the full-on misogyny and full-on racism, and it's like, well, what did you do 10 years ago? Why have you done that now? And it's a real pity, and I got angry at Hammer for doing it. It really me off. and I don't want to be off when I'm watching Hammer. I want to be enjoying it. And I didn't enjoy the direction they took with this, in the slightest.
I will take you up on Elaine, because Elaine has agency. Elaine's the daughter of the Earl. She actually gets the bull by the horns, if you like. She's into her dancing and stuff, and she actually gets the awful Bill Fenton, who was the reporter, who has the weirdest chat-up line ever, where he says something like, I like you, you're not unattractive, but I expect you've got a filthy temper. But she still manages to get him out of the way by taking him to lunch and trying to actually manage the situation, if you like. So Elaine seems to have a little bit more about her. She knows what she can get away with.
Doesn't stop her being a racist, though.
Oh, no, definitely not. But then she's just in the racist club with everybody else in this film.
The racist club.
I didn't think Elaine was too guilty of that, actually. But what I would say, Kev, I completely agree. When I watch this film, Elaine should have been the hero of the film. But I watched this film first time with my wife, who said, "Well, where did Elaine's story about the ballet dancing go?" And she's absolutely right; it disappears. But the one thing that left a really sour taste in my mouth was right at the end when the Earl is discussing possibly returning to the islands, and there's a discussion about, well, what about the people you're leaving behind? Oh, well, my sister has the house, my grandson has the home office, and my granddaughter has the Fenton boy. So not my granddaughter has the dancing, she now has a man. And you just think, oh, for goodness sakes, really? Mm-hmm. And that's to say, that really, really irritated me.
Yeah.
I don't blame you.
It's just a film of sour tastes all the way through. like I said, it's incredible to me that this film got to come on the back of films like Celia and films like Song of Freedom and all these great films that showed a vision of the world at this period that I thought was a bit more, I don't know, a bit nicer, a bit kinder. It's not even about inclusivity or diversity or anything like that. It's just that everyone's horrible in this film, and it's just hard to latch onto anyone. And when you get halfway through and you realise you haven't been watching the film with a smiling face at all, you've been watching it with an utter frown and a pit in your stomach. You're like, God, this is meant to be a comedy. And this is not us trying to be woke on it. I think we're all on the same page, right? And we're all, I spend a lot of time in this period, and I have to forgive a lot about films, and I can still enjoy them. This is just everyone is horrible, apart from a couple of characters. It's just a very, as Ben said, the perfect phrase to describe this is mean-spirited. It's a hard watch because you don't come away from it feeling in any way enlightened. You feel like you've just been beaten up and left in an alley.
Do you think that this is probably a spiritual sort of predecessor to Seinfeld then?
No.
Not in the slightest. Okay, fair enough. So we've got the basic plot. Something I would like to say, another thing that just bugged me slightly. So, okay, slightly understandable. You get the upper class who are dismayed that this Islander, whatever you want to call her, has stowed away to end up in this posh house. Okay, fair dues. But then, wouldn't you then think that the working class staff would then wouldn't it have been a better conceit? Let me change that question. Wouldn't it have been a better conceit if the working class staff had taken her in as one of their own to sort of say, well, I know she's a princess, but she's here, she's alone, she's got no money, no clothes even. And let's hide her, let's make her feel at home. But to be perfectly honest, the working class turn out to be just as big a as the upper class as well. And that was really frustrating. Even to the point where they start lying about what she has done or what she is capable of doing. And on the second viewing I've watched this twice. I'm never going to watch it again because it's but it just annoyed me so much that I was literally had my head in my hands at that point, just going, you could have gone about this in so much of a better way, and you blew it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the most dismaying part about the full film is Welcome to Brexit Britain circa 1950.
Perfect.
It's that the whole plot about the hired help turning against her instantly to the point where one of them is going to give her a backhander unless she gets out of the way. And in a glimpse, a blink and you'll miss it scene, they actually try to get her arrested. A policeman turns up at the door trying to arrest her for witchcraft.
Yes.
And you just think, in what is a 5-minute side plot as well, probably not even 5 minutes, for 45-second side plot. And as you say, why make every single character, bar the principal trio, so deeply unlikable? It's just astoundingly bad film writing. It really is. And anyone that likes this film is not a friend of mine.
To your point, Smokey, I would say, although that might have been a nice plot contrivance about, having the help take her in, God, to be able to say that sentence, it's like, the only way we can make this princess likable is to have her become one of the help. It just tells you everything you need to know about this film.
I didn't mean that.
No. I'm just saying, but you do feel like, oh God, I hope someone's nice there. How about the help?
Yeah.
And then suddenly you feel like you're saying, oh, that's where she belongs. And it's like, God Christ, this such a horrible story.
I'm reaching for something positive,
mate.
That's all I'm doing.
It's a fair point. It really is, Smokey. A really fair point that you've made.
There's no saving it. It's just a horrible film. If you've ever had a friend who isn't as rich as you, or is from another place, or is of a different gender to you, and you like that person, you'll be offended by what the Butler saw from 1950s. It literally hates everyone.
Even the viewer.
Just never
Apparently
make
so.
you laugh.
Well, Adam, I mean, you talk about the help. I mean, they're looking down on the princess, and even the butler at one point is sleeping in a wooden chair in the kitchen or his pantry, I'm not sure. Is he perhaps one of your 24-hour butlers?
No, they wear stripes.
Oh, right.
Racing stripes, or racist stripes.
Montmorency, come here and show them your stripes.
Okay, all right, okay. So we've pretty much run the gamut of sort of saying the massive negatives and the minute positives. Apart from the blissfully short runtime of an hour, what... Right, and I know this is going to sound ridiculous because we've really highlighted it, but what is the most basic fundamental thing that you would add to this to improve it drastically?
Fire.
Yes, exactly.
Good stuff. Yeah. Okay.
More naked feasts. I'm just putting it out there. I mean, let's face it, the idea of a naked feast is great. The more important the meal, the less clothes you wear. Problem is, I'd probably still not get any very important meals.
What about bargain buckets?
Chips and chips.
Meths.
No. Okay, look, I think we've done this, don't you? I mean, what is, unless anyone has anything else to say, we're going to come on to the ratings now. So,
Okay,
go for it.
Kev's got one.
I've got one. You can't make up a love potion from what you find in an English country shrubbery, and I should know.
Says you. Oh, you've tried. Yeah,
I've tried,
I imagine you have,
yeah.
Do you get shrubberies in Doncaster?
There's two.
not that aren't stolen.
They're called the Moors.
Eye of squirrel, toe of dog.
No, that's what.
That's an Aldi shopping
list.
list,
Shrubbery, 9 for £5.
Well, you should point out a little context there. I mean, this is it, isn't it? You say about the witchcraft thing, and this is it again, is that she apparently is able to concoct love potions to turn any man who drinks such to fall in love with her. All right, fair enough. By the way, that ending when the two guys accidentally drink the love potion, I mean, I know you said, Ben, that you actually quite liked the ending of it. I had to mute it the second time around. It was so damn annoying.
But the thing is, the convolution of that plot, that could have been the whole film. She makes a love potion and the wrong person falls in love with her. It's right there in front of them. It's another wasted idea.
No, let's have 45 minutes of people saying awful things about someone who's from another country instead, please. And then we'll have 5 minutes of that incredibly inventive plot idea.
Another awful example of how badly written this film is that in itself, yes, it's not original, and we've seen it before, and it's very predictable. But the whole "I'll concoct a love potion and the wrong person takes it," fair enough. That's a plot device, but they explain it before it happens.
Yeah,
there's a whole scene of narrative where you've got them explaining, "Oh, I believe these island girls can create a love potion. It'll make them fall." This happens before she even does it, and you think, why precurse what we're about to see with an explanation? Do you really think we're that stupid that we can't work it out for ourselves? It's awful. The whole film is awful, and that's it in microcosm.
Mate, yes, they do think we're that stupid, apparently.
And they're wrong.
We saw it coming a mile off.
I didn't.
Okay, all right, lads. Let's get out of here. Let's do some...
Poor old Kev. I reckon more.
Yeah.
Poor old Kev.
Jesus, who lit a fire under your ass?
No, he's been watching What the Butler Saw, and he's going to be nasty to everyone.
I'm mean-spirited, that's what I am.
Mean-spirited.
You've spent too long in Coconut Islands. That's your problem.
Oh, quiet, Mr. Peanut. Oh, damn it, it's rubbed off on me.
Should we add this, though, to the ever-growing list of titles that mean nothing to the film?
Yes.
No, because
that's
the butler does look through the thing and see the girl in the bar. So
But then she looks through a window. It could be what the princess saw.
Looks through the open door. He just looks at her.
No, he looks through the air. He doesn't have to look through something. It's what he saw. What the butler saw.
Ether. What the butler saw through the ether, that thing that was right in front of him.
Yeah, but then every bugger else saw him.
It doesn't say what the butler saw through the keyhole. It says what the butler saw. He could be stood 4 feet away from it.
I think the implication is that the butler saw something he shouldn't have done. It was presented to him.
I love the fact that we've finally become excited about a point about this film.
We're more excited about you being wrong.
For once. I'm on the right side of history for once in my life. Smokey's agreeing with me. There's something really not happening.
I've been nice to Smokey. Smokey's agreeing with you. This is all going topsy-turvy. This is what kind of effect this film's had on us.
It's definitely at the end of days.
It is. It really is. So before we all expire in some kind of weird Hammer-related rapture, shall we hasten to some ratings?
Quick.
So we will go around the table, we will go around the room, and we will take some ratings. Adam, would you wish to go first?
Yes, please. I'll give it a 0. That's my first 0-rated Hammer film.
Whoa.
And that's all I have to say. I think I've explained why. 0. Mm-hmm. Anyone else?
Righty dokie. Kevin?
Yeah, I'll give it a 1, maybe 2. Yeah, it's got some good lines. It has got some good lines every now and again. Like, I should be compelled on a point of personal honour to offer my resignation to the Foreign Office, and then she turns around and says, I dare say, Gerald, that the Foreign Office would survive. There's some good cutting lines in there.
Hang on, put me back up to a 2. Good God, man! You're gonna raise that 20% because of that.
No, I'm going to raise that anyway because there are some good lines in it. Unfortunately, the Lost are amongst the miasma of rubbish in this film.
The Mars bar of rubbish.
A Mars bar of rubbish, yeah. You can have that with maths, you know.
It's a Scottish delicacy.
It is. And as well as that, you've got some good shrubbery action. So yeah, it wins out. I'll give it a 2.
Sweet. Okay, Ben?
A big steaming number 2 for me. A wiser man than me once said, you give a film at least 1 star if the cameras are pointing in the right direction. And I did enjoy the ending. So yeah, 2, but it's awful. It's an awful, awful film, and I'll never watch it again, and it should be burnt and destroyed.
Rightio. I have to concur. I gave this a 2 as well. The saving graces, Edward Rigby and Henry Mollison, and then Mercy Hosted. The 3 likeable characters. I thought Edward Rigby was great. I really did. I thought he played his part for what it was really, really well. Because you kind of forget the fact that he's probably over in that country in the beginning for some kind of imperialism, which you kind of forgive him for.
The governor.
Because, yeah, so you kind of let him off for that. But he's very accepting of people and cultures and things like that. So, but yeah, this is dreadful. Absolutely dreadful.
One thing that we've not mentioned about Edward Rigby is that he scores all his own scenes. He's quite happily singing his own soundtrack all the way through the film.
And House of Hammer bingo, Frank Spencer once again.
Absolutely.
There we go. So, gentlemen, I think we are officially agreed this is the worst Hammer film we have watched so far.
Oh, so far, yeah. Who knows what delights we're going to get to by the end of 2022. So let's keep this one on ice. Maybe there will be another worst picture nominee to go along.
Can't see it.
We've set the bar nice and low.
Yeah, seriously low. With, what the Butler Saw. Watch it at your peril, should we say?
Just don't waste your time.
There you go. What the Butler Saw. And then strangely ignored until the last 2 minutes. If you haven't seen it, write to your local MP and demand it to be played on a loop at a zoo near you now. If you hear nothing back, you can always get in touch with us on Twitter and Instagram at HouseHammerPod. Or if you have many words, drop us an email to scream@houseofhammerpodcast.com. You never know. Thanks for listening, and if you're enjoying the show, why not spread the word? The best way seems to be leaving a review on iTunes, but don't ask me how that works, there's no handle in sight. Until our next meeting, it's goodbye from me, Kev Moore.
From me, Ben Tillison.
From me, Smokey.
From me, Adam Roach.
And of course, Ingrid Kitt. Take care, and we'll be back soon.